Hello everyone, my name is Zach Sunderland and today we are going to run through my micro teaching lesson, which is going to be on the different ways to tie a tie. One of the reasons why I chose to do different ways to tie a tie is because it's a skill that most of us will need to know how to do, being as a lot of us will be going into the professional and business worlds. It really came as a shock to me asking around how many people actually don't know how to tie a tie, so I think this could be a very informative video. In fact, as of 2 weeks ago, I did not know how to tie a tie either. I had a tie that was tied for me in 11th grade, and I would just untighten it and take it off and leave it tied so that I wouldn't ever have to do it myself. So, along with you guys that may not know, I am learning myself still, but I think through some of the instruction that I've had that it's a pretty easy thing to do, and it's a very important thing to need to know how to do. The other thing that was interesting to me is there's actually lots of different ways to tie a tie. Like, I thought maybe there'd be 2 or 3, but there was more than you can count, it seems like. Today we're going to be going over 5 different ways to tie a tie. We're going to be going over the St. Andrew knot, the Oriental knot, the Nicky knot, the Kelvin knot, and the Victoria knot. I hope you guys will follow along, and I hope that you can learn to tie some ties like I have. If you're having troubles with tying knots already, the easiest thing you can do is ask people around you. Most people that are older in the workforce will have an idea on how to tie a tie. So the first one we're going to go over today is the Oriental knot. It probably is the simplest of the ones we'll go over. The Oriental knot gets its name for its popularity in the Asian countries among the youth. Alright, so we're going to start with just our regular straight tie. This is considered a straight tie. We have our difference between a straight tie and, for say, a bow tie. You're just going to take this tie and you're going to put it over your shoulders with the wide end of the tie a little bit further down than the narrow end of the tie. And we are going to start with the seams out. The seam is where the stitch line is within the tie. We're going to have these start out. The first thing you want to do after you have them positioned with the wide end a little bit longer is you want to cross the narrow end of the tie over the wide end of the tie, making an X. Once you have your X, that's where the second step will start. The second step is you want to get your finger on that X, and then you want to take the wide end of the tie and bring it back in front. I like to just throw it over my shoulder so that I know it's back over there. So now you have your finger in the X and you have the tie back, the wide end back on the right side of your body. So this, after we have this step, we're going to take the wide end of the tie and we're going to go back up through the hole around your neck. Once we have that step, we go to the final step. Where we have our finger before, we now replace that by putting the wide end of the tie down through the hole. And once we have that, we have the beginning of our tie. Take your right hand to pull on the small end of the tie and move it up and wiggle with your left hand. And you pull that up to the neck and you fold down and just take a look at yourself in the mirror quickly. Just get this tie nice and tight. And that is the Oriental tie. Now that you've completed the Oriental knot, we're going to move on to one that is a little bit more difficult. The second knot that we will be tying is called the Nicky knot. The Nicky knot was developed by a man named Ernesto Carami, who owned a fashion store in Italy that was named Nicky. Ernesto wanted a more stylish tie to wear out to the party scenes and out to the fashion scenes in Italy. Therefore, he developed a knot that he thought was very symmetrical and looked a little more fashionable than your plain knot, such as, say, a double Windsor or an Oriental. So if you'd follow along with me, we'll show you how to tie the more fashionable Nicky knot. So just like before, this really works for any tie. We're just going to use the straight tie that I have again. This time we're going to want a little more room on the wide end of your tie. And remember, because I'm filming this in the camera, this is going to be the opposite of what you're doing. So make sure that you have it on the right side. The wide end will go on the right side. And just like the Oriental knot, if you can recall before, our first step is just going to be to make an X, bringing the wide end back behind the narrow end. Now step 2 is where we differ from the Oriental knot. In step 2, we will take the long end of the tie and we are going to bring it up and down the hole and pull it down. As you're pulling it down, you want to bring it to the right side of your body. So maybe just throw that over your shoulder to make sure it's on the right side. Now that your tie is on the right side of the body, you're going to want to take it and bring it back in front, keeping it tight, and throw it over your other shoulder, your left shoulder. Now that we have this, I still have my finger in the knot, as you can see, and we are going to take our wide end of the tie, we are going to bring it down, up through the hole, and now, just like when doing the knot before, we have our opening in front. We're going to pull it down through the opening, there we go. Now once you have that, you're going to want to pull, you're going to want to straighten it out. You're going to pull up, bring it to your neck, give it a little length. You're going to want to clean it up a little bit. You want to tuck in what's left of the short end of the tie. Get it nice and snug. You want to fold down your collar and then check it in the mirror to make sure it's nice and symmetrical. The shape is a little bit longer than some of our smaller ties, but it's not too long. Therefore, it's considered a good look, or as Ernesto Parami would say, se guarda bene. Alright, good job. I hope you guys understood the Nicky knot and you got that down, but I know some of you are saying that we're not in Italy and this isn't very practical. So now we're going to jump on to something that is very practical here in the United States and that is used a lot. The name of this knot that we're going to be tying is called the Calvin knot. The Calvin knot is often seen as the perfect size. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's right in the middle of the road. It doesn't really draw a lot of attention, either good or bad attention. So it's a very good one to use for casual encounters or just, church or maybe even some business if you tie it correctly. Some interesting facts about the Calvin knot is that it was actually named after Lord Kelvin, who was an 18th century mathematician. He spent a lot of times in the original knot theory, which was studied a lot in the 19th century, and to honor him, they named the tie after him, and even though he may have never wore a tie himself. So there's a quick tidbit for you. Alright, now we're going to tie our Calvin knot. We're going to take it, and just like the Oriental and the Nicky knot, we're going to start with our seams out, with the wide end of the tie being on the right side of your body and the narrow end being on the left side of your body. And we're going to start it just like we started the Oriental and just like we started the Nicky, by making our X. Once we have our X, we're going to take the wide end of the tie that is on the left side of your body and we're going to move it to the right side of your body. Just throw it over there. I like to throw it on my shoulder like you saw in the other videos so I can make sure that it's kind of at a symmetrical level as it goes across. Next, we're going to take it and we are going to wrap the wide end and take it from the right side of our body and bring it to the back side of the tie and bring it to the left side of our body. Now we're on our left. Now for a second time, we want to bring it back in front. And this time, we want to keep our fingers in there, so maybe switch hands, get your finger in there, so you have that guide when we come back through. Now we're on the left side of our body. We're going to take it, we're going to run it up, get it tight up in there, and then we're going to pull it down through the hole where our finger is. Now that you got that, you just want to feel it out a little bit, pull it up, pull down your collar, and there you go. There's the Calvin knot. And it's important to remember with the Calvin knot, it has a lot to do with what kind of collar you're wearing on your shirt. So you might want to try it out with a few different shirts to make sure that it looks good. Now that you have conquered the Calvin knot, it's time to move on to the Victoria knot. If you can tie the Calvin knot, you should have no problems tying the Victoria knot. The processes are much the same, so if you think about it, it's pretty much tying the same knot, just a few slight things that change. The Victoria knot is very common for business in today's world. It's a lot like the four-in-hand knot. The four-in-hand knot, however, deals with skinnier ties than the one that I'm wearing here. Therefore, I'm choosing to do the Victoria knot. There's not as much history about where the Victoria's knot, the name, came from. However, there's a lot of people that think because when ties were first starting to be worn in the Victorian era, that it was a sign of manliness that men wore ties, and therefore the name kind of the name of the tie kind of transferred to the Victorian knot because of the era in which it generated out of. Like I said earlier, the Victoria knot is much like the Calvin knot that we just went over. So there'll be some of the same processes that you can remember and reuse for this one. Unlike the other ties so far, we started with our seam out. However, we're going to change that this time, and the seam is going to be down when we start. And it's important to make sure the seam is down because that's one of the things that's going to make it different than the Calvin knot. So we're going to do our seams down, and then we're going to have the wide end of our tie about 12 inches lower than the narrow end of our tie. And now, just like the other ties before them, we're going to start with our simple X figure. Once we have our X, it becomes a lot like the Calvin tie. We're going to come back behind. We're going to keep this on our right side. We're going to move to our left. And then, instead of making our second route, we're going to come up through and we're going to go down the hole. This is a fairly simple knot to tie. Like I said, it's like your four-in-hand knot, which is one of the most popular ones used here in America and just used for every tie occurrence. We're going to bring this up to our neck, make sure it's nice. Check it in the mirror if you have the chance to make sure it's nice and straight. Just fold down your collar and you are ready to go. So remember, if your material is a little bit thicker, you might want to use the Victoria knot, which is just like your four-in-hand knot, which is used pretty commonly. Okay, and now we've made it through 4 of the 5 knots that we were going to talk about today. The final one that we're going to talk about is the St. Andrew knot. Of all the knots that we've done today, this is going to be by far the most difficult, but if you stay with me, you'll see that it has a good result when it's done, and I really think it's a good looking knot on your tie. The St. Andrew tie, it is named after St. Andrew, who was a bishop to Ireland, so I don't really know how it relates at all. Some may say that the motion that you go through when tying the tie represents the St. Andrew cross that is located on the church that still stands in Ireland today. Another fun fact, that's one thing you'll see about these ties is they all seem to have some interesting history behind them. Alright, for this one, just like on other ones, we're going to start with our seams out. We're also going to start with our wide end on the right side. This one you're going to be using a lot of the tie because there's a lot of things that you have to do, so make sure that you give yourself tons of room, maybe even separate them as much to 2 feet depending on how long your tie is. And now we're going to get into it. We're going to start by making our X. X is always made, I hope you're catching that by now in the processes, that X is pretty much always the first thing that you're going to do. Now we're going to bring it over like our other one. We're going to make our knot in the middle and we're going to bring it back behind, and now follow with me here. We're going to go up and in, and now we're going to come back to our right side. Now that we're on our right side, we're going to loop in front. We're going to hold it there, so now our tie is facing our left, and then we're going to go up, keep it nice and tight, and we're going to come down in the front. And there you have the St. Andrew knot. We're going to pull it up to our neck. It's going to be a little bit tight here, so we're going to bring it out. The St. Andrew is a nice square looking top, and it does a good job if your neck has a little bit of a wider collar gap. And I think it looks pretty good there, and it's a good tie overall. And that's how you tie the St. Andrew knot. Now we've gone through all 5 different ways to tie a tie. Some of you may have come in not knowing any. Now there's 5 different ways that you can tie a tie. I think it's just a good thing to know, like I stated earlier, because a lot of us are going into the professional world and we're going to need to know how to tie ties. And such as the Calvin knot and the Victoria knot, it's stuff that's used very commonly, so hopefully it's something that you can apply to your lives. As far as going with knot tying, there's a lot of good resources that you can use. The website totieatie.com is a great one. It has all kinds of different ways you can tie, step-by-step instructions on how to do it if you like to read your instructions. Also, YouTube is a great resource. It gets a lot of flack, but there's great videos out there on how to tie a tie that brings you through step by step. And also, I would say, just ask somebody. Social learning is a great way to learn how to tie a tie. People would love to help you. There's not too many people that are going to deny teaching you how to tie a tie if you just ask them. For those of you that watch my video, I'd like to say thank you, and I hope this could help you out in some way. And here is a final clip with some resources.